Welcome back to the workshop studio. Today I have Grant Neve back. Welcome.
Pleased to be back.
Yeah.
Nice to see some sunshine, having been in Joburg for the weekend and seen nothing but rain.
That's absolutely fantastic. Grant, as one fellow floor inspector to another, we have some common problems that we keep on encountering when we go and do fellow inspections. I do inspections for SALFA, South African Wood and Laminate Flooring Association, part-time. And obviously you do inspections on behalf of Wanabiwood National.
100%. And it's become a bit like a movie called Groundhog Day, where you go out and see the same thing every day, time after time. And I think it's time we all got together and tried to eliminate all of the faults that are being done on a daily basis out there.
You know, floor installers have got it tough because, like, when a floor goes wrong, they're always the ones that predominantly get blamed. But, you know, when you come across like the claims that we come across, the same mistakes are being made time and time again. And like, how can we get this message across? That guys, you need to safeguard your job, safeguard your business, your income. We need to get the basics right.
And I think it's true. The rule book hasn't changed. We've had laminate floors for years in this country.
Yeah.
And the rules pertaining to laminate floors, where most of the fitting skills have come from for vinyl, is exactly the same. Expansion, expansion, expansion. And it's such a stupid, silly little mistake.
Yeah.
But zero expansion causes big problems on any SPC floor.
Well, on laminates as well, but today we're going to be talking about SPC, some of the most common problems that we actually encounter.
Okay, let's look at problem number one. The most common fault that I see when I'm doing inspections, and probably you do as well, Barry, is the expansion gaps not left.
Yeah, you know, SPC does need room to expand. Like,
Exactly.
you know, we initially it was sold as a bulletproof, a silver arrow that just hits a spot. It's 100% waterproof, which it's not. It's can be installed on slightly undulating substrates. You got to be very careful. And expansion, the product does need room to expand.
I think it's like anything. If you follow the rule book, it's simple. And I think the stupid mistakes that are made, I don't know why they're made. It's so easy to cut an 8mm expansion gap into the wall under the door frame, but they don't do it. Every single time I go out to an inspection, you see exactly the same problem.
Undercutting door frames. Like, we've got some photographs here that we're going to show you where here the guys are and they're installing a floating floor and it's a wooden door jamb. Okay, so you know that door that you open and close and that wood piece, the frame, that's called the door jamb, if you didn't know. And those you can actually undercut. You know, we've done videos before, which we'll link in the description below, but it's really easy to undercut a door frame and actually get a beautiful end result.
Exactly. I mean, I can understand with metal door frames, but there are solutions for that. But with a wooden door frame, take that extra 10, 15, 20 minutes to undercut the door frame. It's not a hard job. It's a very simple job if you have the right tools. And the final finish is so much better than seeing a gap or a little tiny gap filled with our friend Mr. Acrylic.
You know, if you had to go and take a photograph on your phone or on your Instagram profile or even print them out and say, client, would you like A or would you like B? I think they're always going to choose to undercut a door frame, and that's an opportunity to actually charge more. Think of all the time it takes to actually cut neatly around these door jambs and then go back and fill it in with silicone. It takes a lot of time, it's messy, and it's a subpar result. So it's so much simpler to actually undercut the door frame and do it properly.
I think it's like anything, take a little bit more time. The whole consensus out there is how many square meters can I get fitted in a day rather than how much better can I make this job look if I do the job correctly the first time.
And then increase your rates so that you actually earn a greater margin and then you're not running flat out for breadcrumbs. Grant, you got another one. Explain what happened here.
Well, just going back to the whole interaction with the end user, this was a case of we pulled the skirtings away and we found this. Now, how would you explain to a customer, I'm looking for words here, Barry, as to how each side is touching and then in the middle it's not touching. We've got perfect expansion in the middle. I don't know if another fitter came along. I mean, apart from the fact the pieces either side are way too small to be at the end of the planks anyway.
Absolutely, and a good fitter who's paying attention would never allow for that to happen. They would understand, and if they did get caught out, they would then go and pull up that row and readjust it so that you don't end up with a short piece like this. This is the biggest no-no ever.
Yeah, I think it's always the way. And then you obviously get the pictures where you get to the end of the row and you've got a nice full plank, but they started the install. And at the end of the install, you've got a piece that's maybe 2 centimeters wide that they've tried to slot in. Measure the room before you start. Work out your starting point and then work back from there. So the same piece either side is left on the floors. It looks far much nicer and takes you 10 more minutes to set up.
Like this other one, which you had the short pieces right up at the end. This is another, is this the same side?
Same side.
Same side. Okay, so obviously this installer doesn't get it. But here on the length of the plank, he's also trying to clip in a very narrow piece. And this piece actually wasn't even clipped in at all.
No, it was just left like that on site.
It was left.
Yeah.
Okay, so when it comes to really narrow pieces, they become quite tricky because they will unclip by themselves. As the floor is getting a little bit, maybe a foot traffic, it'll bounce up and down. And there's not enough meat in that plank to actually hold it in place. So what I would do in this situation, obviously you measure your room, you try and avoid these situations, but 100%. Sometimes you have a room that runs out and you will encounter narrower pieces.
Yes.
So in my case, I would actually glue that thin piece into the first solid plank.
100%. Yeah, I've done it in the past with little pieces that you can't avoid. Just put some glue on the joint, then it won't pop back out. And then you're secure, your installation is secure, you're never gonna get a problem.
Because I would struggle to believe that the installer left that unclipped, but I can understand with directional foot traffic that it easily unclip because it is so small.
Yeah. Unfortunately, this is another, and these aren't made up pictures. This isn't something that Barry and I put together in the workshop this afternoon. This is genuine inspections that I have done personally around the whole of the country.
All right, so another point that where we compromise expansion is putting down these trims.
100%. Yeah, I mean the trims, and I've got a friend called Mr. Acrylic and I've got a friend called Mr. Silicon. And Mr. Silicon, he needs to leave the flooring industry. Silicon's got a purpose, but it's not really for sticking door trims because unbeknown to us, under that trim, the silicon will expand and it will pin the floor again. And unfortunately, it's the same old story. We go out as a supplier, we tell them it's expansion. The retailer says, yeah, but you're going to say that because you don't want to claim on your product, but we're just quoting the facts that could be avoided at the first hurdle. All the trims nowadays come with a base plate to be fitted with. Why can't people use the base plate? Is it really too much trouble?
Or there's a methodology on how to glue the trim down without compromising the expansion gap. And again, we've done multiple videos on this before, but this is, again, one of the primary reasons that we get called out as inspectors going to a job site when a floor is failing. What are some of the other common compromised expansion that you encounter when you're doing your inspections?
The biggest one, and I know it's a very controversial subject, is a kitchen island stuck on top of a floor in a kitchen. One, it's going to pin the floor because that island with a granite top is probably in excess of 700 to 800 kilos minimum.
Yep.
And the fact by putting a kitchen island on top of flooring means the customer could have saved 2, maybe 3 square meters of floor. I never understand why it's done. Well, I do. It's because of time restraints, because the floor fitter is always ready to go, and the kitchen guy, no, I'm not quite ready. So the flooring guy comes in, fits the floor, and then the kitchen guy comes in afterwards. He doesn't understand that he's going to pin the floor. So again, it's an education process. Pinning is a big, big issue. Underneath the skirting boards, guys don't like to see that gap under the skirtings. So they go fill it with acrylic. And unfortunately, acrylic works like an adhesive. It's going to stop the floor sliding underneath the skirting. And all of these, we are condemned for saying when we go on an inspection. I think Barry's probably had it as well. You quote the basic facts, you quote the rule book, and they say, yeah, but it's because the supplier doesn't want to pay out, and it's because there's an inherent fault with the product. There's not an inherent fault with SPC flooring. There was never faults with laminate flooring. It was the installation process that was at fault.
I think, SPC and laminates or click-lock florals are generally seen as quite easy to kind of like watch for a little bit and say, okay, click, click, click. I can do that, really.
Yeah.
But there's a whole lot of background science to how these floors move and respond to the environment. And we need to, I always use the age-old analogy of if I was the Incredible Hulk and I put my hand down in the middle of the floor, I would need to be able to push the floor either which way by my expansion gap of 8 to 10 to 15 millimeters on some of the laminates are engineered. And if I'm not able to do that through a kitchen island or even one single little door stopper, that's going to compromise the floor. And then I am going to be held liable as the installer because I haven't followed that rule book. And guys, this is not going to go away. This is something that you need to pay attention to. And rather than cutting the plank tight up and not being a little bit sloppy actually just maintain those expansion gaps. Think of the science behind what is required, and you're going to actually safeguard your install. You're going to establish a better reputation of a greater success factor.
Exactly.
And you're going to be able to raise your rates.
Exactly. And if we can go back to the metal door frames, I mean, backing cord, it's always mentioned, but I don't know how many people actually use backing cord these days. It's a very simple tube. It's available from a company called Sondor, as far as I know. They sell a 5mm backing cord. It goes into the joints, you silicone over the top of the backing cord, and the floor can still move underneath the silicone.
So the theory on that, and I just want to explain it for our audience, is that when you are filling up that trench, that expansion gap trench, you want to make sure that obviously you want to detail it with silicone or whatever. If you are not able to cover it up or have it run underneath a door frame or a skirting, you want to detail it so it looks aesthetically pleasing. But if you fill up that entire trench with your filling or silicone or color-corrected compound, it's a big spacer as such that's just going to lock the floor. So filling it up with a lighter compressible medium and then just doing a thin skim cover over the top, that's how you meet the aesthetic without compromising the science.
100%. I mean, a recent example was I had a guy in the Congo who was doing some work, and he was always having problems in doorways.
Yeah.
And it was a very simple process. I showed him how on the WhatsApp video how to do it. Within 2 minutes, he was on site in the Congo putting backing cord into the jobs. He's not had a problem since in the last 4 months. So Barry, the other issues I want to bring up is, I know we said at the beginning that SPC is a very forgiving floor that you can fit on a lot of floor surfaces. Unfortunately, it's not this forgiving. So if we look at this picture here, I don't know whether the earth had just moved, the floor had sunk or whatever. But
it's a roller coaster.
Exactly. 2-3 millimeters we can get away with over a 3 meter diameter.
Yep.
But we can't get away with half a yard. It just doesn't work. And the sad thing is, this is an expensive floor. So who would install a floor like that? You could feel that underfoot straight away.
The client most probably desires to have the Desire SPC or an SPC floor, and the situation obviously called for a floating floor. But in this situation, you have to do the correct substrate prep in grinding down those high spots or filling in with self-leveling compound the bellies. You have to pay the extra in order to make that desired SPC floor last. It's a lot of money that you're spending, and you want to make sure that you're getting full bang for your buck. Shortcuts like this as well, I can appreciate the installer wants the work, but all of a sudden when you have to go and throw on another 110, 140, 200 Rand per square meter on substrate prep, it kind of throws the price out for the client.
Exactly.
But the client needs to be properly educated on how they're actually compromising their entire investment just because they are missing out on a line item called substrate prep.
Exactly. And I think this what happens over time, if this falls now on a joint, your SPC does this, and eventually, like a piece of metal, it'll just snap. And then they'll say, oh, your lock joint's collapsed.
And also, if you're like dipping into a hollow on a joint, you get that vertical shear.
Exactly. And neither are good for the flooring. And again, it's not the product that's at fault. The product has always got limitations. And if you push the boundaries of those limitations, it's going to fail.
Why do we keep on going back to these job sites? And I think it's also up to the consumer to get properly educated. And I don't know, we're caught in a bit of a hard place here because the consumers are desiring these floor types, but they're not getting all the information when they commit to the purchase.
I think it's just overselling the product. I mean, I did training with a certain chain store this morning, and the first thing I said to everyone after I'd done the basics is do not oversell the product.
Yeah.
Every product that we sell in the flooring industry has got its benefits and everyone's got its disadvantages. Comparing, say, to a ceramic tile, it's a totally chalk and cheese product.
Yeah.
But do not oversell the product. It has limitations. And if we don't think SPC is suitable, then let's go back to a stick down. That's my philosophy. But then with stick down, that opens up another can of worms.
That's going to be episode 2, where we're going to get into all the reasons why we have to write these reports for failed dryback. I think it's about being comfortable saying no to a client or properly educating the client on what the right solution is for their flooring need. I cannot stress that enough. And that's what I do on a daily basis when I'm presenting floor types, is I really take an opportunity to listen to the consumer, understand what it is that they're looking for, because they don't necessarily know exactly what the right format for their application is. There might be a cheaper or an alternative option that is actually going to better suit their needs. And the more we can take time to correctly project manage these job sites so that all these correct installation parameters are done correctly, and how our sales teams are properly selling the right products into the right applications, I think we're going to have a lot less claims on our hands.
I think so. I think, as I say, it's just down to education and being honest with the end user. Do not oversell. Follow the simple basic rule book. There's probably only about 6 or 7 rules applicable to SPC.
Yeah.
And I hear you say, what are those rules, Grant? Well, I was just going to ask you the same question, Barry. But it's simple. Subfloor preparation. Your subfloor must be dry. If it's not dry and you can't prove it's dry, put the plastic sheeting down as recommended by all SPC suppliers nowadays.
Absolutely.
Check expansion gaps. If expansion gaps aren't there, don't install the floor. It's as simple as that. You might as well take the product and throw it in the rubbish bin because it will fail. So we've got subfloor prep, smooth, level, flat, dry. That's your subfloor preparation. Once you've got the foundation right, then we can look at installing the floor on top.
So, Grant, you've got an absolute classic where there was this install and there was a ramp. Tell us a little bit more.
Well, if you look at this picture, it's actually quite funny. I mean, it's very hard to believe that this was fitted by a supposedly qualified installer. So he comes to the ramp, as you can see, and he thinks, well, I can't bend the board up the ramp. If I just cut there and I cut there and put 3 pieces in, it'll look lacquer. And sadly,
this makes me cringe on so many different levels. There's so much. There are 1,000 ways to do this better, and I just see how those end pieces are butted up. Again, there's no expansion gap, which was probably from one room to another.
Exactly.
Guys, listen, this is embarrassing. You can do better.
And I think the problem that people don't understand is they send us to these sites and we're facing the end user, Mrs. Housewife, and we've got to try and, one, keep a straight face and look very, very surprised. And how can we not tell them what's gone on in the installation? I think you guys really shouldn't put us as inspectors in that situation where we've got to basically keep quiet in front of your end user and not tell them the facts and allow you to try and explain it to them at a later stage, because really it's not a nice situation to be in.
It's embarrassing. It's embarrassing for you when you send us to these kind of sites. So if you do have a failure or a claim or a hot-headed client, you've actually got to suck it up and sort out the problem, because if we arrive on site, it just amplifies and gets worse. And again, you've spent more money getting us out there. So guys, really, you can do better. And then it's how we kick the planks together, following the right methodology. Each manufacturer has a slightly different methodology, and a lot of people are getting it wrong. They're overworking these joint structures. They're giving the little ski ramp. Let's check this latest photograph out. Wow. This is from a floor that got installed in a doctor's reception room. And while it's got a very aggressive grain and is holding a lot of dirt, the floor looks absolutely horrible. But you can see where that dirt is really building up at those ski ramps. And that is a telltale sign that the floor has been incorrectly clicked together and the floor is now fully compromised. And I understand it's a ball ache to try and do it correctly. It takes time, but that's what you're getting paid for. You're being paid to safeguard the consumer's investment. So this is how we increase rates. This is how we become true professionals within our trade, is by following these basic rules. All right, well, I hope this gave you a little bit of insight with regards to the common issues that we are almost on a weekly basis engaging in our inspections. And unfortunately, if we find these on one of your sites, the heat's gonna come your way in having to explain and actually make good. So it gets expensive, it's a competitive market. Be professional, guys. Grant, thank you so much once again for joining us here in the studio. We really do appreciate your time joining us and helping us educate the industry. And stay tuned for our next episode where we unlock the best, biggest claims on dryback LVT.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, Barry. We'll see you soon.